Morning, all. I am so enjoying the response to this service this morning. Some of you wandered in and went, we get up at 5 o'clock, finally a service at the right time. Others of you walked in and went, oh my gosh, this is the middle of the night. So if you ever want to get together for breakfast, I would love to do that. I love to go out for breakfast. Let's do it. But let's not do it Monday morning at 7 o'clock. I used to set breakfast dates for Monday morning at 7 o'clock. I don't do that anymore. You want to guess why? No, this is audience response. You want to know why I don't do that anymore? I forget them. And I cannot tell you how many times someone has called me at 7:15 and said, I'm sitting here in the restaurant waiting for you. And I'm like, I'm lying in bed. I'm not getting anywhere. And so it occurred to me, since I felt really, really bad leaving people hanging, sitting there in the booth of them alone, that I would not go to breakfast anymore at Monday at 7 o'clock. Some of you know the pain of that because I have left you sitting there. So I'm basically a trustworthy person, except early on Monday mornings. And there are other people in my life that I like very much. They are not bad people, but you just can't trust that they'll do what they said that they would do. They'll forget, or something else will come up that they would rather do. And then they're the completely opposite end of the spectrum. There are those people that you just know, no matter what, no matter how late it is, no matter how tired they are, no matter how busy they are, if they said that they would do it, they will kill themselves to do it. And you just learn that there are some people that you can trust and some people that you can't. It might be just a small thing, but you know it's true just the same. And sometimes the trust issues surround big things. And this morning, trust is at the center of the story that we're going to tell. We're going to be the same passage that Brendan read earlier, but we're going to read further. On the first day of the week, very early in the morning, the women took the spices they had prepared and went to the tomb. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were wondering about this, suddenly 2 men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. In their fright, the women bowed down with their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, why do you look for the living among the dead? He's not here. He is risen. Remember how he told you while he was still with you in Galilee? The Son of Man must be delivered over to the hand of sinners, be crucified, and on the third day be raised again. Then they remembered his words. When they came back from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11 and to all the others. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary, the mother of James, and the others with them who told this to the apostles. But they did not believe the women, because their words seemed like nonsense. Peter, however, got up and ran to the tomb. Bending over, he saw the strips of linen lying by themselves, and he went away, wondering to himself what had happened. So let's look at the story by itself for just a moment. So it's Sunday morning, which incidentally is why we're here today, not on a Friday or on a Saturday. So it's Sunday morning, and Jesus was crucified on Friday. And because the Sabbath starts at sundown on Friday, they kind of rushed the job of killing him and the other people who were on the crosses. And because the Sabbath was coming, they pretty much did the very bare minimum to actually get them in the tomb. There were very little ceremonies that took place. So now the Sabbath is over. It was over the night before, but most people don't like to go to cemeteries after dark, and these people are much the same. So it is the crack of dawn on Sunday morning, and that's how we get Easter sunrise services, should you care. Some of the women come to do what they couldn't do on Friday and they didn't want to do with the night before. They go to the tomb to wash and prepare the body. And so they show up and they get there and the stone is rolled away. So I want to show you a picture of what this looks like just so that you know. And this is one of my favorite rolling stone tombs in Israel. And one of the things that I want you to notice is the highway right in front of it. It's like on the shoulder. It's the craziest thing. You drive down this highway, and then you stop, and you're like, oh, look, a rolling stone tomb. So this is exactly what it would have looked like. And that rolling stone is probably 6 to 8 feet in diameter. So this is a big rock. So it's kind of a big deal that it's there. So they come up, and the stone is rolled away. And they look at each other, and they're kind of like, well, that's super convenient, because we really didn't know how we were going to move it out of the way. And you know that one of them said, do you suppose that some of the guys came over and rolled it away for us? And you know one of the other ones said, no, that's too much like work. There's nothing new under the sun. So they go into the tomb, and now they're shocked. Because those tombs, if you could see the inside of it, you walk in and there's just a bench there, and that's where you lay the body. I mean, they didn't have to hunt for it. It's not a big place. So they walk in, and on the bench where there should have been a body, there is no body. And they're like, well, that's weird. What do you suppose happened to his body? And we read that, and we kind of roll our eyes and go, silly first century people, because we know what happened to the body. But theirs is a perfectly normal response, because Jesus is dead. I mean, resurrection is not in their game plan. Notice what they have done. They didn't show up with lawn chairs and popcorn, ready to watch when he actually left the tomb. They showed up with embalming spices, because that's what you do when someone is dead. There's just so much humanity in the Bible, so much like real-life situation stuff. And it's one of the reasons, among many, that I'm convinced that the Bible is true, because you can't make this stuff up. And nobody who is trying to convince you that this actually happened would tell the story in this way. So the women are standing there trying to figure out what just happened. And then, let's step back a little ways. I just imagine that there's this conversation going on in heaven. And there's a bunch of angels and archangels who are looking down, at the tomb there in Jerusalem. And one of them goes, they don't get it. And somebody else goes, they're just going to keep standing there. And somebody else says, we're going to have to send somebody down to tell them, aren't we? They're like, okay, you two go and explain it to them. We got to move this thing forward. And verse 4 says, while they were wondering about this, suddenly 2 men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. Biblical code word for angels. And now for these women, it's already been a difficult morning. And they are probably on edge. And I know how my wife reacts when I pop into a room and surprise her. She tells me I need to wear a cowbell, so I cannot sneak up on her. So it probably scared them to death, because all of a sudden there's 2 angels, boom, right in front of them. And it says, in their fright, the women bowed down with their faces to the ground, which is biblical ease for they probably fainted. So there's shock at the surprise, fear at the fact that angels just showed up, total disorientation about everything that has gone on this morning. And when they finally get the smelling salts back out and the women get back to their feet, the angel says this, and I do not hear the same tone of voice that Brendan read it in. This is the tone of voice that I hear it in. I hear a gracious exasperation. Why are you looking for the living among the dead? He's not here. He's risen. Remember how he told you? That's how I hear it. Remember how he said he was going to be betrayed? Remember how he said that he was going to be crucified? Remember how he said that he was going to be raised again on the 3rd day? And ta-da, here we are. And then in wonderful biblical understatement, it says, then they remembered the words. Oh, yeah. And then I love this next line. When they came back from the tomb, you're like, what else happened? We've got angels showing up. We've got tombs, that don't have bodies in it. When it was all over, they went back home again. You're like, there had to be more. They told all these things to the 11 and to all the others. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the others with them who told this to the apostles. But they didn't believe the women because their words seemed to them like nonsense. Well, I think there's two reasons why the words might have seemed like nonsense. The first is because it's the easy one, because they're women, and nobody trusted what women said was going to be true. But I think more than that, why it seemed like nonsense is because people don't get raised from the dead. Now, people 2,000 years ago were not stupid. It wasn't like all of a sudden people developed this insight, in the year 2000. I mean, when they went to the tomb and the tomb was empty, they didn't go, oh, I bet this is one of those times where the dead come back to life, because that happens a lot. They're like, no, people don't come back from the dead. Did they believe in the resurrection? Well, yeah, but they believed in a resurrection at the last day when everybody was raised together. They had no category for one person being raised from the dead. So this is something new entirely. It says in verse 12, though, Peter, however, got up and ran to the tomb. Bending over, he saw the strips of linen lying by themselves, and he went away, wondering himself what had happened. And I love this juxtaposition if you hear it. They remembered his words, and then Peter goes, "You don't suppose." And that's why Peter gets up and looks. Everybody else goes, "This is just crazy." And Peter's like, "Yeah, Jesus kind of did a bunch of crazy things. You don't suppose." And so Peter goes, and he doesn't see anything there except the strips of linen, and he goes away wondering what had happened. So think about the things that must have been going through his brain. Is this another false hope? Is this just something that isn't true? Did Jesus really rise from the dead? And if Jesus was raised from the dead, what does all that mean? What are the implications for this? If Jesus is raised from the dead, that changes everything. And I think that's what Peter is thinking about. He's like, what has happened here? And what happens next? Because if Jesus is raised from the dead, it changes everything. Because fundamentally, the resurrection is not a surprise, happy ending to the Jesus story. It's not like, oh, we thought he was dead. Guess what? He's alive. The end. It's the beginning of the new story, of the new world that God is creating. The tomb is empty, and they have no frame of reference for that because God is doing something new. Because through the resurrection, he's making all things new by restoring all things. And if you look at the whole arc of the Bible, the story begins and ends in a garden where everything is perfect. It starts the way it should be. There's like this mess in the middle, and then at the end, it's back the way that it is supposed to be because God is restoring everything and making everything new and taking it to the place that it was supposed to be anyway. So the resurrection is not primarily about going to heaven when you die. It's about the new world that God is creating where sin and evil lose and death is no longer the last word. It's this world where the Beatitudes, the crazy statements of Jesus that we ignore, where the poor and the humble and the beaten down are given real hope. The resurrection means that those things are real. The resurrection means that God is creating a place where value isn't assigned based on your bank account or your stock portfolio or how many followers you have on social media. Value is given because you're created in the image of God, and you start the day out being deeply loved. It's a place where divisions are healed and peace is valued, where everyone has enough, and where every tribe and tongue and every nation will gather together as brothers and sisters and worship God. And while all of that is not completed, it got started on Easter. And it's all happening now in this growing crescendo to that one day when our faith shall be sight and the clouds be rolled back as a scroll, where the trumps shall resound and the Lord shall descend, and it will be well with all of our souls. That's what the resurrection is all about. It's not about going to heaven when you die so much. It's about everything being made new, everything being recreated in the way that it's supposed to be. Because fundamentally, Christianity is not a philosophical system. Christianity is not an economic system. Christianity is not a political system. Christianity is not a moral system. Many people have tried to make it those things, but it isn't. Christianity is a response. It is a response to a historical event, the resurrection of Jesus. If Jesus hadn't been raised from the dead, then we are idiots. That's my paraphrase of 1 Corinthians chapter 15. If Jesus was not raised from the dead, then we are wasting our time, and more importantly, Jesus is a liar. And that has stunning implications. Because nobody calls a liar a good teacher. Nobody calls a liar a godly person. Nobody calls a liar a great moral leader. If Jesus hasn't been raised from the dead, then there are all sorts of issues. However, if Jesus has been raised from the dead, everything he said can be trusted. Jesus is the person that you can make a 7 a.m. morning breakfast meeting date with, and he will actually show up. If Jesus is raised from the dead, then everything we do is in response to that, and it changes everything. And the disciples ultimately get this. And really, in the context, there's a pretty quick turnaround. It happens so fast you almost get whiplash. The earliest disciples, like in this story, go from not getting it to just a couple of months later believing it and proclaiming the resurrection of Jesus no matter what it costs them. And it's the conviction of the earliest followers of Jesus that helps convince me that it's true. When Paul tells the story in 1 Corinthians 15 about the resurrection of Jesus, Paul talks about all of the people who saw Jesus after the resurrection. And the reason that he does that is because he wants you to know, oh, some of those people still are alive. Let's go ask them. That's why they're listed. That's why in the account that we read this morning, the name of the women who were there, that's why they're listed. Every woman was named Mary, and that's why he specifically says, marry this one and marry that one, and then Joanna. There were some other people too, but go talk to those three. They tell the story better. It's put there because they're like, go check it out. Don't just take my word for it. And then, over the next ensuing 10 years or so, the conviction of the apostles is so strong that Jesus is raised from the dead, that every single one of them, with the exception of John, dies a horrific death while confessing that Jesus has been raised from the dead. And man, I can't get people to commit to coming to a party, Ain't nobody gonna die for somebody unless it is true. So the two things that I really want us to take from this story today are, number one, that Jesus is good to his word. The resurrection is the confirmation that Jesus is who he said he is, and that Jesus will do what he said he would do. He told them, this is who I am, this is what I'm going to do, and he did it. And then the second is, we need to remember what Jesus said. That's where this value of remembering comes in. The disciples didn't get it originally. They had heard, but they didn't really understand. So they just did what they thought the logical thing to do was. Well, Jesus is dead. That's sort of a bummer. But I guess, there's stuff we need to do. So let's go anoint the body for burial, and let's seal the tomb. And that can happen to us too. We can forget what Jesus said and then just trust that we will do the right thing. We might do the logical thing. We might do the thing that seems best to us. But we might not really do the kingdom thing unless we really remember what Jesus said. So what did Jesus say? Well, this is just my list off the top of my head. You can make up your own list of things. Well, don't make it up, but compile it. Here's my list off the top of my head of things that Jesus said. Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. Jesus said, I will never leave you or forsake you. Jesus said, whoever believes in me will have eternal life. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus says, whoever the Son sets free is free indeed. Jesus says, I am making all things new. What would be on your list of things that Jesus said? And if we remember that, I think we will begin to see that the resurrection of Jesus speaks into every area of our lives. Not just our need to have our sin dealt with, which is huge, but it speaks into every area of our life. It speaks into our pain. It speaks into our hopes and our dreams. It speaks into the unfair situations that we live in. It speaks into injustice. It speaks into the good, the bad, and the ugly. It speaks into every aspect of human existence and changes everything, because the resurrection reminds us that God is not happy with the status quo and that God is making everything new. And there's a song that just came into my mind. We have sung this a number of times over the last year. This is the people that the resurrection makes a difference to. Blessed are the ones who do not bury all the broken pieces of their heart. Blessed are the tears of all the weary, pouring like a sky of falling stars. Blessed are the wounded ones in mourning, brave enough to show the Lord their scars. Blessed are the hurts that are not hidden, open to the healing touch of God. Blessed are the ones who walk in kindness, even in the face of great abuse. Blessed are the deeds that go unnoticed, serving with unguarded gratitude. Blessed are the ones who fight for justice, longing for the coming day of peace. Blessed is the soul that thirsts for righteousness, welcoming the last, the lost, the least. Blessed are the ones who suffer violence and still have strength to love their enemies. Blessed is the faith of those who persevere. Though they fall, they'll never know defeat. The kingdom is yours. The kingdom is yours. Hold on a little more. This is not the end. Hope is in the Lord. Keep your eyes on him. So let me ask you 3 questions. The first is, what words of Jesus do you need to remember? Second, what hope does the resurrection offer for you? And third, how does God's plan to renew everything change your perspective on Jesus' mission?